Hello everyone, I am Jaxon. Join me as I uncover the stories of people who didn't take animals seriously. From a content creator who replaced her approved feed with a plastic soda bottle and leaned further out of her car window to a photographer who thought she could give a polar bear cub a hug before things spiraled in the craziest way possible. But first, let's dive into the shocking last minutes of Bella Frost with a giraffe. It was June 18, 2017, and the Texas summer heat was already thick by mid-morning. A sprawling wildlife preserve stretched across nearly 3,000 acres just outside Glen Rose, one of those rare places where African animals move freely, while visitors wind through on a single paved drive-through route. Giraffes, rhinos, cheetahs. The only barrier between you and them is a car window and a set of rules you agreed to follow at the gate. Bella Frost was 26 years old, an Instagram model and freelance content creator building an audience. She traveled constantly, picking up media gigs where she could, but the real product was footage, short-form clips of close wildlife encounters, each one pushing slightly further than the last. She believed that the closer she could capture the animal and the more dangerous it looked, the more people would watch. She wasn't entirely wrong about that. At the entry checkpoint, staff ran through the standard briefing. Approved pellets only. Hands inside the vehicle at all times. Do not tease or bait animals with objects or food. Bella set her phone on the dashboard, pointed forward. She left the pellets in the bag. She had a clear plastic soda bottle instead. Giraffes along the route know the routine. They approach vehicles expecting food, long necks dropping toward open windows. They've done it thousands of times. For them, it's nearly automatic. Bella had something else in mind. Giraffes are the tallest land animals on Earth, up to 18 feet tall, weighing as much as 3,000 pounds. Their hooves can generate enough force to kill a lion outright. In proper feeding conditions, interactions stay controlled. But these are not domesticated animals, and when an animal that size has been conditioned to expect something and doesn't receive it, the dynamic shifts fast. As a giraffe approached the open driver's side window, Bella raised the bottle just above its reach. The animal stretched its neck forward. She pulled back. She did it again, leaning a little further out the window each time to keep the giraffe in frame. Other vehicles had already slowed down. A few passengers had their phones out. Even I would be pissed off if someone teased me like that. Bella really went too far this time, let alone an animal that doesn't have a brain like ours. The giraffe stepped in closer, dropping its head directly towards the window, expecting the object to be handed over. Bella raised the bottle one more time. Her upper body was now well past the edge of the door frame. The giraffe thrust its head forward suddenly, a full committed motion with the weight of a 3,000-pound animal behind it. At that range, the speed caught Bella off guard. She jerked backward instinctively, but her center of gravity had already shifted past the door edge. She went over sideways. The back of her skull hit the gravel road hard on impact. The giraffe, startled by the sudden drop, continued forward through the narrow gap between the vehicle and the road shoulder, and one front hoof came down directly across her upper chest and shoulder as it passed. The force behind a giraffe's leg at that body weight is not something you absorb. The compression across her chest and shoulder, combined with the direct skull impact on gravel, produced injuries that were not survivable. The giraffe moved past. Nearby drivers had already stopped. People were shouting. Multiple phones were still recording. Park staff received radio calls from other visitors within minutes. Emergency services confirmed fatal blunt force trauma from the combined head impact and crushing injuries. Investigators noted that Bella had been positioned outside the vehicle boundary and had not used approved feed at any point. Park operators reinforced the checkpoint briefing, though no major changes followed. They pointed back to instructions already clearly posted. This one is hard to set down, not because the giraffe did anything wrong. It did exactly what a giraffe does. Every choice that brought Bella to that moment was made deliberately, in full view of the rules she was breaking. The footage was immediately held by authorities. Bella Frost's story is a reminder of what happens when the distance between spectator and subject disappears, and the animal decides what comes next. But in our next story, the animal on the other side of that line isn't a giant misreading an outstretched hand. For Kevin Dratt, it was Kruger National Park, a fully open window, and lions resting just off the road. And he was already leaning out before things went wrong. It was September 3rd, 2016, and the South African bush was dry and still in the way it gets in early spring. Kruger National Park covers nearly 2 million hectares of raw wilderness in the country's northeast. Self-drive visitors move through it on a network of gravel and dirt roads, and from inside a vehicle, the terrain feels manageable. That framing matters because it's the inside part that keeps you alive. Kevin Dratt was 34, worked a general office job, and treated travel content as a side project. His friends knew him for getting closer to animals than he should not out of ignorance, but as a deliberate choice. He had a pattern, and the pattern followed him into Kruger. He wasn't the type to quietly observe wildlife. He treated dangerous animals like interactive content, something to poke at until they reacted. Park signage can be seen everywhere in the park, reminding visitors to stay inside their cars and keep their windows closed near large carnivores. Most importantly, do not provoke or attempt to engage predators. In a reserve where lions and leopards pass within meters of vehicles every single day, those rules exist for a specific reason. He stopped his vehicle along a dirt road after spotting lions resting near the roadside brush. He lowered the driver's side window completely and started narrating to his phone camera. Instead of keeping distance like the surrounding vehicles, Kevin rolled several feet closer along the shoulder to get a cleaner shot. He rested his elbow on the open window frame and casually hung part of his upper body outside the vehicle while filming, treating the stop more like a safari attraction than a predator encounter. Lions are apex predators. Adult males can exceed 550 pounds, and their bite force sits around 650 pounds per square inch, enough to hold weight and crush bone simultaneously. They are ambush hunters, but they are also opportunistic, and movement near a resting position registers as a stimulus regardless of what the source intends. They do not process the difference between someone performing for a camera and something closing in on their space. Kevin leaned further out the window as he filmed, making clicking noises and gesturing toward the lions to pull their attention. At one point, he repeatedly snapped his fingers and lightly slapped the outside of the vehicle door to make one of the lions look toward him. When it didn't react immediately, he stretched his arm farther out and waved it back and forth like he was trying to entertain an audience. He extended his arm outside the vehicle, holding the phone for a wider angle. Other vehicles had stopped farther back. Some passengers were already recording. The clearest sign he wasn't taking the animal seriously was what he didn't do. When one lion lifted its head and locked onto the movement near the window, Kevin didn't pull back inside the car. He stayed outside the frame of the vehicle, kept filming, and leaned even farther outward to maintain the shot. Every normal survival instinct, create distance, close the window, stop provoking it, got overridden by the need to keep the moment going. I truly don't understand. Kevin wasn't some clueless tourist who didn't know better. He saw the same warning signs everyone else did driving through that park. He understood the risk. He just decided, in that moment, that what he wanted was worth more than the rules. One lion rose from the brush and began moving toward the vehicle. Kevin kept filming, leaning partially outside the open window, stretching his arm further to hold the animal in frame as the distance closed. Even then, he treated the approach almost like proof the stunt was working. Instead of retreating, he angled the phone lower and leaned farther out to keep the lion centered in the shot. When the lion reached within a few feet of the door, his arm was still extended outside. The lion lunged upward without warning, an immediate, explosive movement toward the exposed arm at the window opening. Its jaws clamped onto Kevin's forearm, and one forepaw drove hard against the vehicle door and window frame in the same motion. The force wrenched his upper body sideways into the metal edge of the opening. Kevin pulled backward. His torso was already partially outside the vehicle. The pull dragged him against the rigid door frame while the lion held its grip and twisted. The wrenching force of a locked jaw combined with repeated contact of his neck and upper chest against the metal frame produced severe trauma across multiple areas within seconds. The movement from inside the vehicle stopped. The lion released and backed away from the door. Nearby drivers hadn't moved. Some were shouting. Others had frozen completely. Several phones were still recording. Rangers responded after emergency radio calls from nearby drivers. Investigators confirmed fatal injuries consistent with a close-range predator encounter through a fully open vehicle window, severe trauma to the forearm, neck, and upper chest. Footage involving the incident was kept private for further investigation. Kevin's family was reportedly devastated, and those who knew him apparently weren't entirely surprised, which is the hardest part of this whole thing to sit with. The exact behavior that got him killed, pushing closer, provoking reactions, treating wild animals like props, was apparently something he'd normalized long before that day. Kevin's story is another reminder of what a vehicle actually is out there, a barrier, not a stage. But in our next story, Drell Quisk was standing in the middle of a crowded market, inches away from a live cobra. It was April 22nd, 2018, and the Marrakech Medina was already alive with noise by mid-morning. The market moves the way it always does, every corridor branching into another, every corner holding a new vendor, a new crowd, a new spectacle. Snake handlers work these tourist corridors regularly, setting up with cobras raised on low platforms while visitors stop for photos at a set distance. Drell Quisk was 29, freelance in the most irregular sense, and relying heavily on viral moments for visibility. He traveled to find footage that got shared, not structured shoots, not planned productions, opportunistic moments. The riskier, the better. His companions traveled with him and filmed everything. At the display that morning, a handler had a cobra raised upright for tourist photos. The verbal warning was clear: maintain distance, keep your face and hands away from striking range, stay behind the marker. Most visitors took their photo and stepped back. Drell wanted what he called a kiss, shot something reckless and funny he could show his family back home as proof of how close he'd gotten to a real cobra in Morocco. Encouraged by his companions filming beside him, he crouched and moved past the suggested boundary until his face was level with the snake's head. Then he leaned even closer, puckering slightly toward the cobra, as if posing for a fake kiss photo. To the cobra, the movement wasn't playful. A large shape was advancing directly toward its head, the kind of forward pressure snakes interpret as a threat. The cobra tracked the movement, staying upright and locked directly onto the closest point in front of it. The handler immediately changed tone and moved in faster once Drell's face entered striking distance. The gap closed to inches. Egyptian cobras are among Africa's most dangerous snakes. Their venom is predominantly neurotoxic. It targets the nervous system and works in stages, shutting down muscle control progressively over hours. The danger isn't always immediate, which makes it more insidious. A bite can feel survivable in the first minutes. It rarely is. Their strike speed is measured in milliseconds. At the range Drell had closed to, there was no reaction time available to anyone. The cobra struck. The bite landed along the lip and lower face, fangs driving into soft tissue at near zero distance. Drell recoiled instantly and stumbled backward from the display. The handler secured the cobra immediately after the strike. All I can say is Drell thought he was creating a memorable moment, but Cobra thought it otherwise. He remained on his feet, holding his face, while his companions filmed portions of what followed. The strike itself had been captured clearly on multiple phones. Market activity slowed around them as people cleared space and emergency calls were made. Over the following hours, the neurotoxin moved through his system exactly as it's designed to. His eyelids began drooping. His speech became slurred and increasingly difficult to follow. He struggled to hold his head upright as muscle control deteriorated progressively. Breathing became visibly shallow as the toxin continued its work on his respiratory system. Responders arrived, but the envenomation had advanced too far for intervention to reverse it. He died from respiratory failure caused by the venom's neurotoxic effects. Local investigators confirmed fatal envenomation from the cobra bite. Witness accounts described the clear progression of neurotoxic symptoms before death. Market operators reiterated distance rules for tourist interactions, and some vendors temporarily restricted close contact photo setups in the immediate aftermath. Our next story moves somewhere else. Hazel Vrell was on a guided safari, standing outside the vehicle, just a few feet from an elephant that had already started giving her a warning she didn't take. It was January 14th, 2015, and the dry heat of Sri Lanka's southern interior was already pressing hard across the scrubland by mid-morning. Yala National Park stretches across nearly 1,000 square kilometers of dense jungle, open grassland, and rocky terrain along the island's southeastern coast, rich with wildlife at almost every turn. That morning, the safari vehicle had stopped along a roadside where an elephant was feeding just a few meters from the road's edge. Hazel Vrell was 31, worked in general service employment, and was building a travel audience on the side. Footage of close wildlife encounters was the product. She had joined a guided safari with a professional guide and clear pre-trip instructions. Stay inside the vehicle at all times. The guide had said it before the vehicle had even rolled out of camp. When the vehicle slowed near the feeding elephant, Hazel stepped out. The guide told her not to. She stepped out anyway. Another tourist inside the vehicle already had a phone pointed outward and was recording. Elephants are the largest land animals on Earth. Adult females weigh between 6,000 and 10,000 pounds and can close short distances in a charge faster than a person can process what's happening. They are not unpredictable animals. They are actually deeply expressive. A raised head, ears spread wide, weight shifting forward. These are not subtle signals. These are textbook warnings. Every wildlife guide working in any elephant habitat on the planet knows exactly what they mean. The elephant raised its head as Hazel moved toward it. Its ears fanned wide. Its weight shifted forward. She laughed and gestured toward the trunk, adjusting her position to line up a closer shot. The elephant stayed locked onto the movement directly in front of it. And I think Hazel wasn't walking toward the elephant because she doesn't know the danger. She was curious about it. Hazel reached further forward towards the trunk. The elephant's response was immediate. A sharp trumpet and a full forward surge in the same motion, the kind of acceleration that takes an animal of that size from still to a committed charge in almost no time. Hazel turned to retreat. She was standing only a few feet from its path. There was not enough distance between them. The first contact drove her violently to the ground as the elephant surged through the roadside space. The momentum didn't pause. The animal's mass carried it directly over her position during the charge, its weight moving through the space she occupied before it could redirect or slow. Dust and debris rose around the impact zone, partially obscuring the sequence in the footage as the elephant cleared the road's edge. It slowed after moving past the area. No prolonged engagement followed. It didn't circle back. The charge had lasted only seconds. Tourists inside the vehicle had not moved. Some were shouting. Others had gone completely still while still recording. Guides radioed for assistance immediately. Responders from nearby ranger posts arrived shortly after. Investigators confirmed fatal trauma consistent with a short-range elephant charge, injuries from the direct initial impact, and the weight displacement as the animal moved through her position. Park officials reiterated the requirement to remain inside safari vehicles throughout all wildlife encounters. Tour operators briefly reviewed their guide protocols and visitor briefings, though no major policy changes followed the incident. Hazel's family received the news the way families always do in these situations, completely without preparation. And I think what makes this one harder is that she was on a guided trip. There was a professional present, but still it ended this way. Hazel stepped out of the only thing keeping her safe on that road. For our next case, Jaxon Flaw was standing on a dock deep in the Everglades, dangling bait just above the waterline. It was August 9th, 2017. Everglades National Park stretches across over 1 million acres of sawgrass marsh and slow black water at the southern tip of Florida, home to one of the densest alligator populations on the continent. The docks extending over the water here aren't just viewing platforms. They put you directly above animals that have been running the same ambush formula for 37 million years. The dock sat only a few feet above the waterline. Warning signs throughout the park are explicit. Do not feed or lure wildlife. Do not approach alligators. Those signs exist because elevated platforms, dark water, and people holding food create exactly the kind of setup that ends badly. Jaxon Flaw was 38, worked manual labor, and ran a fishing content channel on the side. He was known for using bait to draw animals closer to the dock for dramatic footage, not just catching fish, but engineering encounters. He'd done it before. It had worked before. That was the problem. He attached a fish to a line, lowered it just above the surface, and propped his phone on the railing, angled downward for an overhead shot. Then, instead of simply dangling the bait, he started jerking it side to side over the water like he was teasing a dog with a toy, laughing toward the camera and pulling it away each time movement appeared below. At one point, he crouched near the edge and slapped the dock railing twice with his palm to draw more attention from the animal beneath him. Nearby visitors had already stopped walking. A few had their phones out. Then the water below started moving. American alligators are ambush predators built for exactly this scenario. Adults reach 13 feet and over 1,000 pounds, with a bite force around 2,900 pounds per square inch. In the water, they are fast and completely silent until they aren't. Their kill mechanism, the death roll, is a rapid spinning rotation used to disorient, submerge, and tear. They do not need deep water to execute it. Jaxon saw the wake forming beneath the bait and grinned toward his phone instead of backing away. He lifted the fish just out of reach once, then lowered it again almost directly over the approaching shape, as if trying to make the alligator jump for the shot. Nearby visitors could be heard reacting, but he leaned even farther over the railing. The alligator launched vertically out of the water. The strike was explosive, jaws driving upward toward the bait and the arm in the same motion. Its jaws locked across his extended arm just above the wrist. The force shifted his balance forward instantly. The railing gave no leverage. His feet slipped on the damp planking as his upper body pitched over the side. I keep coming back to the moment the water started moving, and he treated it like part of the performance instead of the warning it was. He wasn't just near the animal anymore. He was actively provoking it for the camera. He went into the water while the alligator held its grip. Submerged, the animal immediately began the death roll, a violent, continuous rotation generating enough torque to tear limb from joint, regardless of resistance. The water at the surface churned and went dark within seconds. Bystanders on the dock retreated back along the platform. Some were calling emergency services. Others were still recording from a distance. Jaxon did not surface. Footage from the incident was kept away from the public. Park staff responded after emergency calls from multiple visitors. Investigators confirmed a fatal alligator attack at the dock edge, directly linked to the deliberate baiting behavior. Injuries were consistent with a bite and a sustained death roll beneath the surface. In our next story, the water was the chosen location from the very beginning. Yulene Brunt was offshore near Oahu's north shore in an unsupervised shark dive with no professional oversight, already reaching toward a tiger shark circling just a few feet away. It was May 27, 2016, and the water off Oahu North Shore was doing what it does on clear mornings: flat, warm, and impossibly blue. This stretch of Hawaiian coastline is one of the most recognizable in the world, and it sits inside one of the most active tiger shark habitats in the Pacific. Beautiful and dangerous are not separate things out there. They run together in the same water. Yulene Brunt was 27, worked part-time service jobs, and spent most of her energy building ocean travel content online. She had come across a claim that circulates widely in diving communities, that touching a shark on the nose redirects aggression and neutralizes a threat. It sounded clever, simple, the kind of thing that turns a dangerous animal into a challenge instead of what it actually is. The dive that morning was informal. No licensed operator, no professional supervision, just a small offshore group with cameras and shared confidence. When a tiger shark appeared and began circling at mid-distance, Yulene moved ahead of the group to get a cleaner angle while the others stayed behind filming. She descended again as the shark circled through the area, then turned toward one of the cameras behind her. Instead of backing away, she grinned through her regulator and stretched her arm toward the shark's face, wagging 2 fingers inches from its snout like she was teasing a pet for the video. A few divers laughed underwater and kept recording as the shark continued its pass. Tiger sharks are the second most dangerous shark species to humans. Adults reach 14 feet and over 1,000 pounds. Unlike more selective predators, they investigate almost anything within reach. Their serrated teeth are designed to cut through dense material and bone. They circle, they pivot, and direction changes underwater happen faster than most people can react. As the shark swept past her position, Yulene pushed farther into its path, trying to tap the animal directly on the nose for the camera as it turned. And this is the core problem with the nose touch theory. It assumes a calm, stationary shark already positioned correctly. But this was a large tiger shark moving through open water. The conditions that theory depends on never existed. The shark pivoted abruptly during the pass, its body swinging inward toward her extended arm and exposed shoulder. Her arm shifted directly into the bite path before she could pull away. The jaws closed across her upper arm and shoulder and twisted violently before releasing seconds later. The force snapped her sideways underwater. When she surfaced, the damage was already obvious. Severe trauma across the shoulder joint and heavy arterial bleeding spreading rapidly into the surrounding water. Divers rushed toward her while others screamed for emergency assistance and signaled nearby boats. Portions of the interaction and aftermath had already been captured on underwater cameras. The bite had severed major arteries across the upper body region, and the blood loss in open water progressed too fast to control. By the time emergency responders reached the group from nearby shore teams and support vessels, she had already lost too much blood to survive. She died during transport. Investigators later confirmed fatal blood loss caused by a single close-range tiger shark bite to the upper arm and shoulder area. Local dive operators reiterated no-contact wildlife guidance and warned against unsupervised shark interactions in the area. Some operators temporarily suspended similar excursions afterward, though no broader enforcement changes followed. And I think the hardest part about this story is how casual the decision looked right before everything went wrong. Yulene treated a 14-foot predator like it was part of the joke, teasing it for the camera, as if the animal existed for entertainment instead of being a wild apex predator. Footage circulated widely online afterward because of the rarity of clear underwater recordings, capturing both the interaction and immediate aftermath. Where Grixon Flaw leaned over still water from a dock, Yulene Brunt was already submerged and moving when everything changed. But the next story leaves warm Pacific water behind entirely. Lesta Crand stood near a remote tundra shoreline outside Churchill with a camera in hand after spotting a polar bear cub near the ridgeline and decided to step away from the group for a closer shot. It was November 2nd, 2018, and the Churchill coastline was deep into the freeze cycle. Wind cutting across the Hudson Bay, snow packed hard across the tundra. Churchill is known as the polar bear capital of the world for a reason. Every autumn, bears migrate toward the coast as the bay begins to freeze, concentrating along the shoreline in higher numbers than anywhere else on Earth. Lesta Crand was 33, worked in general administrative roles, and traveled seasonally for wildlife photography content. This trip was guided and structured with pre-departure briefings that laid out the rules clearly before anyone stepped outside. During a photography stop along the shoreline, the group spread out slightly for different camera angles, the way groups tend to do. Low, snow-covered ridges ran along sections of the coastline, partially breaking sightlines between members of the party. Lesta spotted something near one of the ridges, a polar bear cub moving close to the snow rise. From where she stood, it appeared to be alone. At first, she laughed about it with a few people nearby, joking that the cub looked friendly. Then the moment shifted into something worse. Lesta started boasting that she could get close enough to hug it for a photo. A couple people in the group immediately told her not to even think about it, but she kept playing it off like the danger was exaggerated, smiling, waving her gloves toward the cub, acting like the warnings were part of the joke. Reading through the comments, I see a lot of people calling polar bears huggable or fluffy. It's a tempting thought, but having looked into what these animals are truly capable of, that soft exterior is a terrifying mask. Lesta stepped past the designated group boundary and moved toward the cub anyway. Polar bears are the largest land carnivores on Earth. Adults can exceed 1,500 pounds and cover open terrain at 25 miles per hour. Unlike most large carnivores, they do not treat human proximity as a deterrent. A polar bear responding to a threat near a cub does not give a warning charge. The movement is immediate, direct, and it does not stop. Lesta crouched within several yards of the cub and extended her arms outward toward it, laughing back toward her friends, as if proving she could actually do it. Members of the group further back had already started shouting warnings toward her position. The cub shifted near the ridge line. A full-grown adult emerged from behind the snow-covered ridge within seconds. The distance between the adult and Lesta was already dangerously close before either position could fully register. And this is the part that keeps hitting me. There was never a version of this where she saw the cub, and it was actually alone. The adult was there the entire time. The ridge was just hiding it. Lesta turned immediately to retreat. There was no vehicle within reach, no barrier, no elevated surface, open tundra in every direction. The bear closed the gap across the flat terrain at full acceleration. Guides were shouting and moving toward the area, but were far too distant to physically intervene. The attack unfolded within seconds of the adult appearing, before any meaningful distance could open between Lesta and the cub's position. The impact was direct and immediate, the full force of an adult polar bear at charge driving her to the ground on the open shoreline. The injuries sustained from the strike and the bear's follow-through were unsurvivable. Several phones had captured the approach and initial contact from further along the shoreline. Others in the group had already retreated towards the vehicles. Guides radioed for emergency assistance immediately. Investigators confirmed a fatal polar bear attack directly linked to close proximity to a cub outside the designated group area. Lesta's family received the news within hours, and the people who were standing on that shoreline with her, the same friends she had been joking with moments earlier, had to carry home the memory of watching that confidence disappear in seconds.